result of the issues that we've identified and summarised in the report, there is additional fees that we have agreed with the Chief Financial Officer, and that now needs to go through a process with the acceptable audit officials to approve as well.
Okay.
Take questions, Chair.
So what about asking the officers to set out what progress has been made in terms of recommendations, and then they'll open it up for questions and comments?
Okay, recommendation 1. So we had a few software issues with our supplier where it's not necessarily calculated the housing benefit that our residents are entitled to, but it's some of the subsidy that goes with that entitlement, particularly where we've undertaken adjustments going back into previous years. So the current position is we've written to the DWP, they're aware of it, we're waiting for confirmation from them what they want us to do. We believe that we have fixes for about 80% of the errors that we've identified. So some of them are groups of errors. There's still a small number outstanding with our system supplier. We weren't isolated on this, and I think Suresh can probably confirm at least another 2 I think that you audited had the same issue, but not to the extent that we had regarding the numbers. So that's where we are with the first recommendation.
Are we suing them?
Are we suing them?
Yeah.
Not at the moment, so we're looking to resolve the issues first of all, see what the DWP say, and then we will look at whether there's any contract issues with them.
We've got to
The second recommendation, in effect, we ran the initial grant claim too early. We ran it before a software release came out from our supplier, so we will make sure that that doesn't happen next year. The third one regarding Clarion. So we have had problems with Clarion. We have about 4,000 Clarion tenants receive housing benefit for us. So generally each year their rent changes, either up or down, and rather than be notified manually of every single one, we accept a data file from them which we update automatically. What's happened is in the past we've had some issues with tying up our claim to the rent coming over. We've undertaken, as part of the 17-18 grant claim, we undertook an exercise of about 350 cases where we thought there were a problem and corrected them. Or we didn't correct them, we identified them, worked out what the over or under payment was and adjusted the grant claim accordingly. We've done a lot of work for the 18-19 grant claim, which we haven't submitted yet, regarding the Clarion rent increases or decreases. And we've just gone through our billing process for council tax for next year. And again, we've done a lot of work with these cases, checking cases. Again, we have had some issues with the quality of data coming through, but this time I would say that we're on top of it because we know exactly what to look out for. So we've done quite a bit of work on that, Chair. And then finally, the errors. I think the last 2 years, certainly last year, we reported about errors, or the highest rate of errors was on self-employed claims. So I won't say this time last year, probably last December. So in December, the years right now, 17, relating to the 16-17 grant claim, we put in place some further training in the office and a much more rigorous check-in regime. And that was put in place December 17. The downside, I guess if you like, is the 17-18 claim, we had only put the check-in regime in from December. So we had all of any previous adjustments or assessments prior to December where our check-in hadn't been as rigorous. I think the other thing that we have with any housing benefit claim, when the auditors come in, they select a blind sample, and it could be that we've not actually touched that claim for 2 or 3 years. So whilst we might be checking every single case now for self-employed, which in fact we're doing, if the auditors come in and select a sample and 1, 2, 3 of those cases haven't been assessed for 3 years, there's a chance that that case hasn't had the rigorous checking regime that more recent ones have. So I'm thinking that with regards to the self-employed claims in particular, there should be a gradual improvement, but I can't guarantee, because of the numbers of them, they're about 1,200, that when the auditors come in, they won't highlight a case that was previously assessed. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Okay, I'm happy to take any questions.
Well, Suresh, would you like to respond to that and to tell the committee whether you are satisfied with the explanations that you've had and the steps that have been taken?
Yeah, so all that's in line with what we discussed when we agreed these recommendations back in January, it was in January time. I think the thing with as we said, the thing with this is because we pick random samples, there is always a chance that we'll pick something that hasn't been looked at for a couple of years. But we're satisfied with the response that the officers have given to response to those actions.
Okay. Questions from the committee? John?
The overpayments that have been made on the clients, have you been able to adjust that, to collect it or adjust it in some way?
Okay. So we would look at an overpayment, and if we believe that the client or the resident was aware of that overpayment, then we would recover it. So for example, if we were paying a Clarion housing tenant and we were paying £100 rent, housing benefit, and their rent was only £90, they should know that they're being overpaid. So we would look to recover that. In some instances, if we don't think that the resident would have been aware of that overpayment, then we may not look to recover it. So we would look at the cases on a one-by-one basis.
So presumably we have lost some money there as for those who you don't
There
recover.
that may be the case in some, yeah.
Adam?
Thank you, Suresh, for that. So, in terms of obviously the samples that have been picked this year, that sort of flagged up errors, etc. So, going forward, could there be some sort of judgmental sample being picked so we can revisit the errors in addition to some new samples to ensure that the correct work has been done and has been rectified?
Yeah, so the starting point for 18-19 will be where there's been errors in the previous year. That's the starting point for 18-19. So we will definitely test those areas again, as well as the additional samples in the areas.
And will you be able to differentiate between those that are a bit older and see whether the success is improving as a result of the changes that have been made? Because I think we'd all be interested to be reassured on that one.
We certainly can, we can record that data. I think the other thing, just perhaps I didn't flag up, with the self-employed cases, the DWP over the last 6 months have provided us with a list of any self-employed case that hasn't been updated for over, I think it was 18 months, and they've given us some additional funding to check all of those cases or to make sure that they're accurate, I'm guessing in line and ready for universal credit. So that exercise has also been going on as well. So I think there's a good chance next year that anything that's selected, well, next year, no, it's not the case because we'll be doing 18-19. So we've only been doing that since about September. So I guess the opportunity for older cases will reduce, but there's still going to be some there.
Rebecca? Sorry,
I just wanted to ask whether the Civic software issue has happened before, because in the report it says that it was a known bug, so I just wondered whether that had come up.
No, never before. So what they call as a known bug is because somebody's identified it with them, and then they flag it up as a known bug for authorities.
Yes, to follow up on that point, there was a moment you mentioned that there was an update that was implemented in the software after a while, and you said that solved most of it. How much wasn't solved by that update? Are there any outstanding errors inherent within the software? And would the errors that were due to the software not being updated have been solved if that was updated earlier? And what was the relationship with the supplier on that?
I think that's perhaps two slightly different things, and maybe I've not explained that very well. So at the end of the financial year, we have to run a grant claim and submit that and create an audit file. And the software suppliers tell us when to do that. In effect, they say, this is the release that you must do it on, and the auditor's aware of that. So our initial submission to the DWP was done before that software update, so therefore we ran our initial grant claim too early. We then, once we realised that in probably August time, we ran it again, and I think, if I recall, it made about £3,000 difference to the £82 million. But still there was a difference. We ran it again and we had to do some additional work. The bugs are totally different to that, totally separate to that. As I say, we've got fixes. So some of the cases we have had confirmation, actually they're not errors where we struggle to balance, they balance them for us. We've got other cases where there are known bugs and they've given us fixes for them. But we have got, I would say, about 20%, and I think if I recall, Suresh, there was probably about 21, 22 cases initially that had an error with them, if you like. So we're down to perhaps 20% of that, where we haven't got a fix still, and we're waiting for the system supplier to provide one.
Brenda.
Thanks, Chair. On page 7, where it says claim or return, I'm just looking at the figures. Seems to be about £10,000 each year, extra year. Is that going to be a continuous thing? So now we begin in the 60s and going up? At the top of the page, where it says... Oh, okay, we have two different pages, page 13 and page 7.
This is about the fees, yeah?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so the fee, obviously the fees reflect the work that we need to carry out, and where we identify those issues, we're required to carry out additional testing. So the more issues we find, the more work we have to do, and that obviously feeds into the fee that we get. It's not continuous upward trajectory, it depends on what we find.
It just looks like that.
But clearly, if the actions that the officers have outlined result in the improvements that they want, then clearly we won't do as much work next year as we have done this year, and so the fee will then reduce.
Would you end up giving us money back due to such a good job?
Sorry, Chair, it's probably worth just saying, I think David alluded to it, we are awaiting DWP to respond to these issues, and typically they will ask you to do some further work and then for us to verify that work. So that fee is likely to be higher than that at the end of the work that we do on this plan.
So if we're asked by the DWP to do the work, there's an obvious question there. Why don't they pay for it?
So we are engaged by them in effect to do this on their behalf.
Well, we have to pay.
You have to pay.
Interesting. Okay. Any more questions? Okay, thank you for that. So we're moving on now to the external, item 5, external audit planning report. Unless you would answer that.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Chair. So this is back to the more traditional report that we produce in terms of the plan for the audit of your accounts, which end the financial year, 31st of March 2019. I'll just take you through the overview, Chair, and a couple of other bits to draw out, and I'll take questions. So in terms of your page 19 is where we start the overview. That's where we kind of summarise the risks we've identified for this year's audit. Clearly, off the back of last year's audit, there are issues that we will be following up on, and you'll see in that summary on page 19 that we've got valuation of land and buildings as a significant risk for 18-19, which obviously reflects the issues we had in the prior year. The other one on that page, just to flag, is what we've called inappropriate capitalisation of revenue. Just to explain that, so we identify in all audits that management is in a unique position to potentially override controls. But actually for a local authority, the one area really that management could override controls is in terms of what they capitalise and what they treat as revenue. So that's the reason why we've identified that as a significant risk. The other risk on that page around the pension liability is what we call inherent risk because of the size of that liability and the estimation and judgment that goes into determining that. Over the page, on your page 20, we've got a couple more risks. So you do have some new accounting standards that you have to adhere to for 18-19. Whilst both of those new standards are unlikely to have a material impact on your accounts. You clearly do need to carry out an evaluation of what the impact is, and then we will then obviously review that to see if we agree with that, and I know that's underway at the moment. And then the other inherent risk we've got in there is about your PFI. That's quite a complex arrangement that you've got, and it's been a few years since we looked at it in detail, so we'll be doing that this year and using one of our specialists. Also on that page, just to highlight, is the levels of materiality that we use to undertake the audit. So the overall materiality is just over 9.5 million, and that's based on 1.8% of your turnover in effect. That 1.8% is a reduction from the previous year's 2%. So as a firm, we have recognised the increased profile of local government financial resilience, and so we think that reducing our top level materiality is the right thing to do in terms of the work we need to do. Performance materiality of 4.7 million is in effect our testing threshold. So you might recall that last year that started at 75% but dropped down to 50% because of the issues that we all identified. Our approach means that because of those errors from the previous year, we have to use 50% again this year, because until we're assured that those errors are rectified, then we have to apply that lower level of materiality. And then finally on that page is what we call the kind of order differences. Anything below 476,000, we would communicate to you as a committee. Clearly we communicate to management and they would make a decision about whether or not they'd adjust for any of those errors, but we think that's a trivial level for you as a committee to be aware of. Just a couple of other things to flag. Value for money conclusion, we have once again got a significant risk. I am aware that the authority's medium-term financial plan is looking much better than it has in the past in terms of the gaps, but there are still gaps for future years, and we are aware of budget pressures in children's schools and families, so we will be looking to see how effective those arrangements are to manage those value for money risks. And then finally, I'm sure you'd want me to talk about fees. So if I can get to it, your page. So your page 26? No, sorry, 46. We've included the table of fees. So again, in light of the previous years and the additional work that we know we need to do, but we haven't fully scoped the additional work, I put a range of additional fees in there for this year. So there will be some additional work we need to do. So we will be engaging with our own real estate people again on your PPE work. The level of materiality being lower than it should be does mean we're required to do additional work. So I want to be transparent about it, indicate there will be an additional fee, but at this stage I'm not in a position to be able to say exactly what that is, hence the reason for the range of fees. I'll stop there, Chair, take questions.
I'm sure you'll take it easy on this, because you've already identified that the gap is a bit too large in terms of the medium-term financial strategy. So anything that we could do to keep that down would be much appreciated, for sure. Roger?
Yeah, just a couple of points, Chair. The areas for focus, as outlined on page 19 and 20 that Suresh went through, I think it's probably just worth pointing out one area there. The work around the land and buildings, yes, is specific to us, although it was part of a national initiative last time. So clearly we recognise the issue there. And indeed the PFI, because we have a PFI, they need to go through it in some detail. The other issues there are pretty common to local authorities, as I think Suresh alluded to, because I think it's worth pointing out that these aren't singled out because they think there's a specific issue within it's just the general national initiative that we will be picked up. I guess the other point I'd make on fees, Chair, is within that range, of course, the work we will be doing as officers of Merton will be to try and keep those fees to the lower end of the spectrum, not the higher end.
Ben?
Yeah, so within those fees, can you explain which ones you envisage as being kind of a one-time or as part of a focus, especially the PPE stuff in the coming year? Do you see those dropping off or not being needed in the future, those increases in fees?
Yeah, so the two areas that I flagged for 18-19 about additional work on property, plants and equipment, and then the additional work arising from the change in materiality. In an ordinary year, yeah, you wouldn't have a significant risk around your property, and you wouldn't have to do that additional work. Similarly, we wouldn't have a materiality of 50%, we would have 75%, so again that wouldn't attract that additional fee.
Thank you, Jack. The significant risk around the property obviously was created by the £163 million restatement last year. So in terms of the audit testing this year, is there some sort of approach where we can sort of identify if there is an issue earlier on in the audit rather than sort of keeping it till the last minute, and obviously the timetable got missed, we got signed off late, and etc. Because obviously the committee is quite keen to sign off on time with obviously statutory deadlines, etc. So obviously in terms of the significant risk, is there sort of anything we can do, council can do to work together to sort of get that balance satisfied early on?
Is that covered in the later report?
It is,
Okay,
yeah.
so,
But
I was really reassured by that report, because if it hadn't been on the agenda, I think we would have all been firing questions about that. And so can we do it?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I'll invite you to ask the question. Any other questions at this stage? Okay, thank you, Suresh. So we now move on to the item 6, the audited final accounts. And that's Roger.
Yeah.
Please.
Thank you, Chair. Well, members will be aware, I'm sure now, that the earlier close-down date that we have to work to, that being the accounts being prepared by the 31st of May and subsequently audited by the 31st of July, which of course we found challenging last year, primarily because of the PPA issue that we've alluded to earlier. And I thought I'd just outline some of the early work that we're doing to assure members that we're on top of the issues and learning the lessons from last year. And to it, we will be having regular members meetings with the team. We meet with our external auditors on a weekly basis to iron out issues. And specifically with regards to PPE work, we are undertaking some additional internal scrutiny, and some of the valuation work we've actually externalised as well to get that extra independent view on it. I'm also pleased that EY have extended the interim audit period. It was previously about 2 weeks, but it's about 6 weeks now, and that will allow us to pick up the point that was made earlier. That will allow us to do an awful lot more sample testing. Members will be aware that we have to do more sample testing this year because of the materiality levels. But it also enables us to get a lot of that, what I call upstream work, out of the way in time, whereby we will enable our external auditors to come up with any issues that we will be able to address in good time. And you recall, Chair, last time part of our challenge was some of those issues came to light quite late in the day. It didn't afford us a huge amount of time to correct them. So this year I'm confident we'll be able to do that, provided we get through all that sample testing. And our auditors have been with us for over a week now, and so far from those regular meetings I have with the audit manager, the work seems to be going according to plan and is in good form. Obviously we've got some way to go on that, but I just wanted to assure members that extra interim work will enable us to get an awful lot of work done early doors. We've also looked to areas where we can improve, and that's listed at 2.6 in the report. I won't read them out in absolute detail, if members will have read them, but we're looking at a number of factors. One is we've actually brought in an extra member of staff, an agency member of staff, into the team, who was previously a chief accountant at a number of councils, and she's providing an extra level of scrutiny and rigour to our audit work. And one of the first tasks that she's been undertaking is to streamline our accounts on the basis that the fewer the statements we need to put in the accounts, the less audit time needs to be spent on them, the less scrutiny there, and the less problematic they may become. So we're doing a lot of work on that. We're using the portal a lot better. That's the way in which we pass information to and from our audit colleagues, and we're also tidying up our working papers and making sure they are fit for purpose. So those extra protocols coupled with the extra staff and the extra interim audit time, put us in the best possible place to enable us to fulfil my ambition, and that clearly to get the accounts prepared and audited within the deadline.
I think Adam was speaking for the whole committee when he raised that point, and you might want to respond to what you've just heard, or...
No.
Suresh, do you want to comment on that? Because we've heard that this work's already started, they've been in a week. Are you satisfied that things are going well at this stage?
Yes, and we have been engaging with, as Roger said, actually, with Roger and his team since we finished last year's audit. So it is definitely an ongoing kind of engagement with officers. And to date things are going as smoothly as we would like to.
And I think we've got a commitment from you that if there are any things that are changing in terms of the way you view things or deal with things, that you will flag up sort of the earliest possible warning in order that our officers can respond and adjust in order to meet the very tight timetable that we've got to achieve this year. So that's still the case.
It is, yes.
Right. Any questions? Okay, thank you for that. So, item 7 is the internal audit progress report. Morden.
Thank you, Chair. This is the progress report on the 18-19 internal audit plan that was agreed by this committee. We've so far finalised 28 reviews, and I think 81% of those have come out as substantial, which is in line with what we had last year. We're on track to complete the plan for this year. The 5 limited reports, assurance reports, I think 3 of them we've already reported up to committee. There are 2 that have gone up since, the declaration of interest and corporate procurement. I've actually given you some details on those in page 69. And as you'll see, the progress against implementation will be limited, and for all audits, we always follow up with progress on the action that's going to be that's due to be implemented and that's been agreed. The limited assurance reports we've had this year, I think 3 of them have actually been on procurement issues, so that is an area that there's a few concerns with, but we're working with procurement team and to get the actions implemented and get progress. So anyone's got any questions on the report?
I have a question about the IT system. It says that there have been 2 IT audits completed this year, and they've both been given... Oh, sorry, 61. So 3.8. And it says they've been given substantial assurance. I'm just wondering, with tying into the previous agenda items, why have they been given substantial assurance when we've just been highlighted quite a big issue with the IT system? It seems contradictory.
We saw we didn't cover that
okay.
system. It was actually covering whether we're completing the rest of our IT systems and assets and the additional disposal and the software. But we kept a proper records of what software we have and
really not specific. Okay. Thank you for explaining that.
David?
Yes, it's a question about schools, but not a specific school. But it's something I'm aware of, and I'd be grateful if there's some comment available, even as Roger is still here. An attempt was made in several schools to pass fraudulent cheques in the pre-Christmas period, which I'm sure you'll be aware of. I mean, to the tune of £20,000 or more at one school that I'm associated with. And so my question is, when are we going to move to BACS in the schools so we can avoid cheque fraud? I should add, this was an external cheque fraud. It wasn't something that arose in the schools. But because we're still using cheques, dummy checks, or I say dummy checks, false checks, rather bad forgeries, were attempted to be passed, and fortunately the banks picked them up. But you know, if we're not using checks, then can we be using backs sooner rather than later?
There is some schools that are using backs, and we got involved in looking at the controls and running that out. I'm not sure on these schools now, but at the time we had a high school and a primary school when we were involved. I don't know if I could find out what other schools, but it's the school's decision on whether they want to go down that route. And we've set out some controls and a written guidance on how to manage using backs.
Were you aware of the issues of that? See, it strikes me that if we make the schools aware of that and encourage them to go down the system that you are kind of helping them move to, if that's their wish, but you know, that might nudge them in the right
I think the
direction.
high schools seem keener than primary schools, but I can check that.
Well, I'm talking about a primary school, Hollymount, which wants to use backs but doesn't seem to be able to. I think it's waiting for permission. So that somewhere in the street, and I'm chairman of the business committee as well. So it's kind of one of the reasons I'm asking the question.
Are you considering your position, David?
Well, you know, nowadays you don't have to resign on anything.
Yes. This great income's not.
Chair, if I could just...
Sorry.
If I could just say, one now I am aware of that, I will certainly be looking into that. As was previously said, I mean, schools are autonomous, so you know there is a degree to which we have to persuade them, and certainly the evidence of this is a method we can use to persuade them that this is a better way to go. But I will certainly look into that school that wants to use backs and is finding it challenging.
I'm sorry, obviously I could have raised this at another opportunity, but because it was sort of in front of us tonight, it occurred to me that it was worthwhile raising in committee.
David, did you say there were other schools that you'd heard that?
Oh yes, well there were others. This attempted fraud happened, I think, to several schools in the pre-Christmas, literally just before Christmas.
Can we?
Yes,
John,
I have a question.
Maybe make a bid for this.
Corporate procurement, limited assurance you've given to it. And I think the auditors picked that up also, didn't they? So I was wondering if you work with the auditor, external auditors. Why do they have to pick that up with you?
I don't work with the external.
I know you're internal, aren't you? But what I'm saying,
Yeah.
why did they have to pick up from, limited adjustment corporate procurement? They had a problem with that. If you're the internal auditors, why did you correct it and work with them?
Sorry, I didn't.
Do you
What
want
I'm
to
saying-
repeat the question?
Yes, is a corporate procurement, there's a limited assurance in it. And I'm saying, did you advise the auditors, external auditors, or you don't have to tell them anything?
I am the internal auditor.
Yeah, the external ones, the
Oh,
big
yes.
one. Did you?
No.
You didn't?
No. Well, they may ask for a copy of our report afterwards.
Yeah.
When they're doing their audit, they may come and ask, because we look at the financial systems, so
Yeah.
they often come and ask for a copy. But we don't involve them as we're doing our work.
Yeah.
During the progress of the audit.
I think it says that the register is not being updated. And that's probably one reason why, there's always limited assurance. Who's responsible for keeping the register?
The officers,
The asset
the
register.
contracts. So when we went in and we did the audit, it was in October.
Yeah.
We've been to the board since, and I've been told that a lot of improvements were made in December. They've actually asked us to come back and do a follow-up audit because they're very confident that these improvements are having an impact, and they want us to do an audit in
1920 to sort of reflect the changes. So, but all the actions that we've recommended, we will be following up anyway to make sure that they're implemented.
Roger, do you want to comment on that?
Yes, Chair. I've just had a couple of comments. I mean, corporate the contracts register is a particular area we've been focusing on through procurement, and the need to make sure that they are comprehensive and they give the full information, i.e. when contracts are due for renewal, because only by that methodology can the procurement boards then monitor when contracts are due for renewal and reduce the incidences of contracts needing exemptions because they've run out of time, etc. So we're doing an awful lot of work, and I think it's fair to say that a lot of the contracts registers are in a lot better state now, and they're pretty much complete with regard to listing on the contract. The thing about external audit, I think the point's made, but just to emphasise that one of the things that external audit do is determine how much reliance they can place on internal audit work, because to the extent that they can do that reduces the amount of audit work that they do, and hence the fees we pay, which of course is something we're all terribly interested in. And so within that review work, they will have picked up any of the control issues that they've been worried about that you alluded to.
Yeah. I think the contract register is kept up to date. You don't have these limited assurances.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The declaration of interest, obviously, there's about 66% of the sample tested proved that there was zero evidence of completed declaration. So going forward, is there some sort of controls put in place where if someone hasn't sort of completed it off by the end of the period, that, I don't know, an automatic reminder is sent to them or chased? It's a bit like in terms of my CPD, if I don't complete it off by the 31st of December, I get a letter straight in the post as the next week saying that why haven't you completed it off?
Well, couldn't we just say if it's not completed by the next payday, if there are consequences? I'm looking at the Chief Executive here, I'm sure that would change behaviour instantly. It's probably illegal.
There's that slight caveat you'd have to attach to it.
But I think management of the staff expected to complete them should be required to actually gather them in and make sure that we are fully compliant. So are there sort of measures now in place to ensure compliance?
Chair?
Do you want to go first now?
Yeah, the reminders are sent, and I would get the reminder if any of my staff went completing. So I think that's the usual methodology. They're absolutely 100% perfect, but that's what we do.
Satisfied with that?
Well, it's a system.
Okay. Any other questions on this? Okay, thank you. Internal audit plan, that's Margaret again.
Okay, thank you, Chair. This is the plan for next year, and this has been agreed that departmental management teams have been round to them and discussed it. As I've listed on page 73, I've put up the work that we're going to do from those reviews, and also from discussions and from boards that happened either in Merton or in other boroughs that would trigger sort of a review that we need to get assurance that we haven't got an issue. I have in this next year's plan, I've built in a few anti-fraud work on CHAPS payments because of the Barnet fraud. I've also put in just a review on procurement cards, but as a proactive fraud review, and their recourse to public funds. So I built in those into our audit plan. So otherwise it's a balance of audits on IT, financial systems and Pecuniary for the council, as you can see from page 84 onwards.
Okay, any comments or questions? And you've got that flexibility built in if need be.
Yeah. as requests come in through the year, which they did last year, obviously the usual ones we'd need to look at quite quickly. So we'd either, I've got a bit of contingency, or some of these audits may move then the following year depending on the urgency of the work, but I will be flexible, yeah.
Right.
Definitely.
Okay. Thank you. So item 9 is the draft submission to from Merton Council to the Boundary Commission. And who's going to introduce this? Is it Andrew?
Yeah, Councillor Allison was going to speak first.
Right,
then
okay. Mark?
Thank you, Chair, and I just want to say before I forget, thanks to Andrew and his team for all the work that's gone into this, and to everybody who's been involved in contributing towards it, including politicians on all sides. This has been an interesting week in politics. And I think it's good that we finally got to the most controversial and important and significant matter before the country this week, which of course is the boundaries for the London Borough of Merton's councillors. As you know, there's a two-stage process. First of all, the Boundary Commission wants to have a look at the number of councillors that we feel would be appropriate for Merton before they then go into actually drawing up the boundaries. And the approach that we've taken, we've had briefings with members, we've been able to ask questions of the Boundary Commission and contribute to the report here. The feeling is...
Sorry, Mark, I can hear you just, but because they haven't got the microphones, could you just do your best to speak up a little bit more?
I'll do my best.
No, I heard most of it. I just asked you if you could just speak up a little bit more.
I will do my best. The approach that's been taken generally by most people involved has been that the size of the council kind of to some extent reflects our ambition to be an efficient and effective organisation. Those of us who've been around for a little while have seen a considerable improvement in the way that the proceedings of council have gone, including administrations from both sides, and the role really of scrutiny, the introduction of the scrutiny process with currently 4 panels has been key to that. And what we've been very conscious of the need to do is to be able to ensure that there are sufficient numbers of members around who are able to participate in that without being too onerous on them, and meaning that we effectively have to have full-time councillors, or worse, where we have councillors going back maybe to what it might have been 40 or 50 years ago, where it was people doing it as a hobby who could afford to, or who were retired and didn't have other responsibilities. And so we think that the sort of balance that we have approximately now is about right. Our judgment is that 57 is an appropriate number. It takes us back to what we were back in before 2002, I believe, and it's in line with a number of other councils, whilst at the same time being of sufficient size. There's a bit of a value judgment. I know that the Liberal Democrats have suggested that 60 would be appropriate, but we're in the same sort of ballpark, is what I would say, and it then comes down to just a judgment. Our judgment is that 57 is the right actual number. That's agreed with the Merton Park Independence Group. I know that the Conservatives have a different view and different reasoning, but there's a consensus really amongst the 3 other parties as to what's appropriate to have an effective and efficient running a council, and so that's why we're proposing this for you. Obviously, we hope that you'll be able to fall in behind it, and for further details, obviously Andrew and Jed are here to answer further questions.
Are there any questions to the officers?
Well, lots. I thought we were going to hear from Andrew next, aren't we?
Well, Councillor Harrison has set out quite a few of the things I was already going to say. So, thank you for the introduction. No, thank you anyway. So I haven't got a massive amount to add just on the introduction. So, I'll go on for a little bit, but
You don't
I won't
have
go
to.
too. No, well, it's mainly the same sort of points. So
Well, in that
we might as
case,
well go to questions.
Yeah, let's go to questions. David, you have many questions.
Well, I do, and it's a bit difficult to know where to start. But, I'll sort of lead on our side, but my colleagues also. I'll lead you on this. I mean, obviously, Adam is your vice chairman. But I have been round the block a few times, and so I can remember 1999, and I can remember 1978, and I have a very good perspective of how things have changed, including obviously now the use of technology such as email and social media and so on and so forth. Question I specifically, a couple of questions I specifically want to start with, please, before maybe we comment on whether 57 is the right number. Is how you got to 57, because I'm looking at recommendations 5 and 6. It says 6 in the first one. It says the council's considered all options from retaining 60 to 57 to 54 or further. But I don't know who. Well, so the question is, who's been involved in that then? Because Conservative group haven't been asked to input to officers. It seems to me as though the report is written around the assumption that it'll be 57, which we all know is the view of the Labour group. Now, the Labour group are the administration, but at number 5 too, it says, books on Merton would look fairly similar to some of our neighbours, assuming those boroughs don't dramatically reduce the number of councillors. And certainly we've seen elsewhere in London, have we not, Harrow, Bexley, Hillingdon, that they have reduced their numbers. So I want to know how this magic number of 57 has been arrived at.
Well, I think I can offer a little bit on that. So basically, at the start of this process, the Boundary Commission came to talk to the leader and officers, and we were given a fairly strong steer by the Boundary Commission that due to our sort of councillor to elector ratio numbers compared with other boroughs, it would be difficult to argue for, say, an increase in councillors if that was what we were going for, and indeed even to remain at the same number. So basically, the view was kind of taken that it would be nice to remain at the same number as we are, because we think that that's the best way that Merton is run, but to have more chance of getting a submission agreed by the Boundary Commission that 57 would be a good number, because then you could still have 3-member wards, and also with the going on to the point with other boroughs, well, Kingston have only got 48 councillors and they've got a lower ratio than us, and they're actually trying to advocate to remain the same. And out of 10 boroughs that have been reviewed so far, 8 have actually gone for no change. So we thought that going for 57 would basically, keep the status quo as far as possible with the good governance and good running of the council. But with giving the Boundary Commission something to work with from their side as well, and the electoral ratio side.
So, for example, this committee was 3 committees. It was the Standards Committee, the General Purposes Committee, and the Audit Committee. And we did away with 2 of those committees. We used to have a Street Management Advisory Committee. We don't have that anymore. We've shed our housing stock. we've shared green, we've outsourced green spaces, we've outsourced our waste collection, we've outsourced our legal services. Well, we have shared services now with other boroughs. And I think the really big thing that I find rather odd is, in fact, I find it almost a bit offensive, is 99, we didn't have the Local Government Act 2000. Now, I know that's referred to, but actually it's substantially changed the way in which councillors operate and the way in which they operate on the council. Now, if you are an opposition member, and sad to say, I've had more practice of opposition than I have in power, there isn't a great deal of work to do. I'm talking about council meetings now. You can look at the numbers there. It's a mathematical thing, isn't it? And Labour members here might feel that they have to go to proportionately more scrutiny meetings, for example, than opposition members, which is true because they're entitled to a built-in majority. But it's entirely up to the controlling group how many seats you have on the committee. So, for example, at the moment, on some of the scrutiny committees you have 10 and 12 members. But you don't have to have a committee with an even number of members. So rather than having to provide 7 members, whilst the combined opposition provide 5, you could have 6. You'd still have a majority and a casting vote if you still insist on hanging on to the scrutiny rolls. So right across the piece, there is no way you can say that where we are today and where we're going forward is the same as it's been in the past. And can, I'll paraphrase your words, but you've just tinkered with the numbers. Yes, we will be putting in our own submission to take the number down below 50, and that would still be very much in line with the electorate per head of councillor that you're seeing across London, and you're seeing as councils look properly at the detail of how things have changed.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, the obviously initial thoughts from me in terms of the report is that technology has changed over the period of the 20 years. I know in the past people having told me that people used to contact them by post and then they'd write it back and send it. Technology's obviously allowed us now to pick it up on our mobiles, forward it on, support in the group offices, etc. So where obviously 57 in my opinion has been tinkered with, that figure seems a bit high in excess of the technology drift and change in society. But coming on to obviously my sort of 2 key questions is obviously one is the report talks a lot about comparison with Kingston and Richmond and etc. But I mean we aren't really talking much about the SIPFA 15 and obviously comparing to other boroughs with a similar size would obviously come across a bit better. And obviously our second point is obviously to do with school governors. I know in the past that it was sort of a requirement, or it was a agreement where councillors had to be school governors. School governors is obviously now cut down to a single local authority governor, and obviously where councillors opt to still sit on the governing board, but that isn't a requirement sort of anymore to sort of like continue excess meetings to sort of force that number up. So obviously my first point coming back again is the comparison seems to be merely to do with sort of Kingston and Richmond rather than other councils across London.
I think in one of the appendices there is comparison in Appendix 1, we have got us in a table on page 28 of the
Page 132.
page 132. We have put in a table there where we stand in the neighbours. The comparison sort of with the neighbouring boroughs was linked really to the sort of the South London partnership, where we do a lot of work with those boroughs, and also not really, Croydon isn't really, but you know, Kingston, Richmond and Sutton are fairly similar kind of boroughs to Merton in terms of size and demographics.
One of the sort of justifications used in the report is sort of basing caseload on the number of member inquiries. Of the table breakdown on page 127, the only one area where there has been a uplift consistently over time is environment and regeneration, and obviously to a greater extent in the last 9 months. Wouldn't the expectation or hope be that those would reduce, so actually using that as a measure to sort of make the case doesn't kind of take into account what caseload might look like over the next few years, because you would hope that the teething problems that have led to, certainly if I think about my own member inquiries that I raised, the vast majority of them all seem to be on one theme, and I would hope at some point that might stop.
I think on that we just took a snapshot of as it is now, as opposed to 16, 17, 17, 18. So yeah, I mean, hopefully that will reduce over time, but there may be other issues that will cause member inquiries in the future too. We share other services or things coming down the line.
But is it appropriate then to sort of put that figure in? Because obviously then someone having a look at that report is going to think that is the actual number, rather than sort of like commenting that it's a spike, one-off type of event that will sort of calm down over the period.
Well, I think it's a bit like the electorate. You know, we have to take it on the, you know, we have to give a snapshot really. So the for the population projections, if we were doing this in a year where we just had a region poll, we didn't in 2018, so the electorate was a little bit lower than it would have been at the end of 2017 or 2016. So, you know, from that point of view, the electorate, we'd give a snapshot of the electorate at that time, it would be higher. So, I suppose with that, you know, we just need to take a snapshot of the status quo.
Just a few comments, questions, just to make sure I've got it right in my head, the kind of balance of factors you're trying to include in the decision to make in 57. So, you know, for me, key issues are, you know, population ratio, electorate representative, team numbers within wards was mentioned in the report as well, scrutiny numbers. These things for me, it's useful to hear the evidence about technology as well. That has changed the way people work, but there are a number of factors here that seem to me can't be mitigated by changes in the way we work. For instance, team numbers, if there were, I don't know the numbers coming from the Conservative group, but if there were a substantial decrease in the amount of councillors, there would still be the issues of scrutiny, the amount of panels people are on, the way we work in council, but with team members within wards, maybe looking after casework, maybe having families, and being inclusive of that wider experience that would need to come with that flexibility, just to make sure I've got kind of all the factors in there. Are there any other factors that you would highlight that I've missed in that kind of brief summary?
Well, in support of it, that was one of our major factors, that we thought that if you did reduce the amount of councillors by a significant number, then you would perhaps struggle to attract people to be councillors, or they might agree to be a councillor, stand, get elected, and then when they realise the workload, decide to basically say, well, I don't think this is too much. And also, like Councillor Harrison was saying, in the past, there was a lot of, people who would do it as a hobby or a bit of perhaps retired or something like that, whereas now people can do it in their spare time. And on the technology argument as well, I know technology does make things easy, but when it makes it harder as well, because when somebody, you have to be quite energised to write a letter to your councillor, where I don't think you have to be very energised just to forward an email, to send an email. So in terms of email correspondence, you can maybe argue that councillors receive more now than they did when it was a letter or a surgery.
I saw Brendan next.
And just answering to Councillor Bush, and you mentioned some of it, technology, and I'm old enough to have been around before technology. And it was said that it would eliminate all this work we're doing and paperless situation. It hasn't worked, I can tell you. And sometimes it is worse, because I have been on the computer at 1 a.m. sending out things to, not residents, I must say, to other councillors in other boroughs, because they join with my ward. And I get an answer straight away, and I think, what's the matter with you? Why aren't you sleeping? Just like I didn't really want some extra work. But people, it makes you work harder sometimes. But we have to remember that not everybody is on any of these technology events, because some people don't want to be part of it. And it really doesn't show a face to the council sometimes, because it's just writing, just let's answer miserable Brenda, but in fact you need to meet with people sometimes to talk. And the next bit is, when I was coming in 2010, so I did a lot of homework on my own. I wanted to know what exactly happened, and I went into history, and the council was much less, like 17 councillors at some time. I remember the exact date. Now we've got to 60, and we've been told probably 57 is a good one. Does that mean we lose one ward? Are we going to have ward with 2 people or one person?
A lot of that depends on the boundary commission in the next stage. So the deadline for this submission is the 29th of March, and then in mid-April the boundary commission will make a decision on how many councillors Merton should have, and then after that, from I think it's the 23rd of April, they kind of open up a consultation where people can decide, basically put in representations for what the new wards should look like. And after that stage, there'll then be the boundary commission will draw a set of arbitrary boundaries with a certain amount of councillors and wards, and then they'll put that back out again for consultation. What they have been doing in other areas in London is they haven't basically restricted it to 3-member wards. So yes, it could go to a 2-member ward or even 1-member ward. I think at the briefing, Councillor Mason, you were basically arguing for 3-member wards, but they would say that they are. It could be anything. Yes, it could be 1-member, 2-member, 3-member. It's all up to the boundary commission.
I quite agree with what Brenda was saying. She says all the stuff I wanted to say, but having computers and technology does not really do a lot for a lot of residents. Residents like to see people. They like to see the council. They like to discuss things with you. Sending an email off sometimes actually irritates them. And to be frank, there's a lot of work out there, even for 3 councillors. Especially, our wards are big. And if they change the boundary condition, the constituency, it's going to be even bigger. So if we're going to end up with 1 or 2 councillors in the ward,
it's going to be really difficult to do the work and do the council work. Coming to scrutiny. And if I have my own will, I think I would like us to stay at 60 personally. We can't. So I just think it's dreadful that we keep having to change wards and boundaries just to suit, I don't know, people's whims, I think, because it's going to be hard. I mean, our wards is quite big. I mean, we have a lot of work to do. So.
Thank you. Mark.
You probably won't be able to answer this actually, but you mentioned that some people might well drop out of the council once they realise the amount of work that's involved, and I do completely understand that. You probably haven't got any details of how many people have done that within other councils. I'm not aware of anybody here at the moment. So that's one question I don't think you'd be able to answer. But I'd be interested to know how many, say on this council, are retired. I'm in the lucky position that I'm retired teacher. I wouldn't be able to do this job if I was still teaching. No chance. Well, I might do it, but I would probably not do it particularly well, and I would probably not be able to do teaching very well either. And the mention about the technology, well, as an ex-games teacher, I've been on a very sharp learning curve in terms of IT, as everybody, or many people in the Labour Group are aware. And I find that I spend a huge amount of my time speaking to residents. That's my job. I'm there to represent the residents. Committees like this are, to me, are, to one side, really. In many ways, no disrespect. I'm there for the residents. So I spend a huge amount of time answering emails, going to see them, speaking to them on the telephone. It is a full-time job, and I think it's interesting. I've just read a book called Why We Get the Wrong Politicians by Isabel Hardman. It's about it's about 8 pennies actually, but she might well write another one on why we get the wrong councillors. Because I do think that it is a staggeringly difficult job, and I have huge sympathy for colleagues who have full-time jobs, families and so on. So I'd be interested to know, how many of us are retired, how many full-time jobs. I guess that's the data protection issue, but just have you've got to be a transfer. I just like
members check through, couldn't you? I think it says where people are employed and who they're employed. So that is possible. But I mean, if I could just follow on from that point, I think it's really important that councillors are representative of the population that they serve. And I am very opposed to the idea of councils insisting on, I speak of something that's kind of rapidly approaching that sort of age where we are sort of, I'm still working full time. In the 33 years I've been a councillor, I've had a busy and demanding job. But I actually think that's really important. I think it's good to have retired people, but it's also good to have lots of people from diverse backgrounds with lots of different experiences. I can't describe how important it was when I was at the newly elected council to actually have the experience of going to the school gates and picking up my kids. Actually, then people would say, what are you lot doing about this, that or the other? And I'm sure that those of you who've had that experience will find that a really useful way of keeping in touch with the community that you actually represent. I recently had a bit of a row with a councillor from Surrey County Council because I serve on the joint overview of scrutiny and health, and they have their meetings in the daytime, and I think that discriminates against working people, and it leads to a certain type of person being a councillor, either somebody who's so wealthy that they don't have to work, or somebody who's retired, and I don't think that's the right kind of message to send to the community. We should represent the communities that we represent, and we should be able to have those connections with them. And I think in terms of listened very carefully to what comments about to say and want to reduce it. And I know that there's a philosophical desire to have small government among certain political tendencies. But my feeling is that there is, in the 33 years that I've been a councillor, there is more work to be done than there was when I was first elected. Technology doesn't reduce that workload, and it certainly doesn't, as colleagues have said, take away the importance of talking to people. Today, I spoke to a man, a constituent in his 80s, who has lost his wife recently. He's having a problem with mobility. He doesn't do emails, but he does expect his counsellor to be able to speak to him, able to take up his problems, and then report back. And all of that's been done by telephone because that's his preferred method of communication. And I think we need to recognise that we're not all, and the people that we represent are not all of one generation, and millennials. They're people who, some of whom really struggle with technology, and we have to serve all of them. And I think, when I think of the numbers, I think there is every justification for staying put, but if we have to reduce it, and that's the guidance we've been given, then if it's good enough for Hines, then it should be good enough for Merton. Mark, you wanted to speak? I'll take the chair afterwards.
So much of what's been said is I completely agree with, and talk about helps to answer the question I was going to make. Which just to, I think it was Brenda's point about the three member wards, and Andrew's obviously dealt with a large part of that. It's not strictly speaking at this stage that we'll talk about how many members will be in those wards. However, we have already, in the discussions that the Boundary Commission have had with us councillors in briefing sessions, we've already made it very clear to them that we in Merton value the system of three member wards, and have concerns arising from the sorts of things that Mark was talking about, that if you reduce it to 2 or 1 member wards where you don't have the support, and where you can't have the opportunity of saying to somebody, I've got to pick up my kids, can you deal with this? Then what you will do is you will create a situation where people who've got young families, or people who've got caring responsibilities, or people who are from non-traditional backgrounds are discriminated against, and they won't take part in being a councillor. And we have expressed our view to the Boundary Commission that that is wrong. We take diversity and equalities very seriously here, and we want them to take that on board in the decisions they make. That is the next stage rather than this one, but you've both hit the nail right on the head. That is exactly what the kind of argument that we will be making to them after they've set the number, that we do want to carry on with the 3 member wards.
Joe?
I was anxious to let Councillor Williams and Councillor Bush and Councillor Barlow know that the points that they've raised have been heard in this discussion. I think Councillor Williams opened by saying that the administration in the end have got their votes and pass what they want, but things to do with elections in a way also step beyond what should just be a matter of party politics. There is a perfectly internally consistent argument to think about the council in terms of the number of committee meetings that take place, the role of the opposition, the role of the administration, and given that Councillor Williams, Councillor McCabe and I are all of a similar sort of generation, really, we've seen what happened in the 80s and 90s, and there are significantly less council meetings. That's absolutely true. But, and it's quite a big but, the last and most recent, although it is now a bit dated, review of what local authorities were for was carried out by Sir Michael Lyons in his report that was published in 2005-2006 now. And in that report, he identified that the role of the local authority was to be the genuine and undisputed leader of the local place in which councillors served, perhaps what council reform. He said we make a lot of the fact that we know and understand our communities, and we constantly argue with central government that we should be allowed to carry out activities because of our intimate understanding of our communities. And he said you can only do that by being close to those communities, and some of your time is spent in the council chamber, and quite a lot of it should be spent outside, making that boast that we give to central government true. If we're going to do that, the report sets out all the sorts of things that councillors are required to do. When we as officers looked at that, we found it very hard to go to a figure below the one that we're recommending here now. And it wasn't that we weren't aware that there were arguments that could argue for something quite dramatically different, but we felt, given the current understanding of what a council should be, what it should do, and how councillors contribute intimately to that, we thought this was the way we should go.
David.
Can I come immediately back to on that? You're implying that the 57 number is an officer number?
I'm saying it's a number that officers were very comfortable with. There was clearly a dialogue with the administration, as you would expect there to be in this sort of discussion. The Boundary Commission themselves called the meeting in the leader's office and called it with the leader, as the leader let us know that the meeting was taking place, and we went to with them. As Andrew was saying, they were very, very clear at that meeting. They're looking for a reduction in the numbers, and they pointed out the ratios and how they compare with what the national average was. So the steer could not have been clearer.
I just want to pick up on a couple of points. Firstly, I don't think there's any dispute that a 3-member ward is preferable. When you come to look at, though, that rewarding exercise, it may well be that there have to be a couple of 2-member wards, as indeed there have been in the past. Point one. I think a lot of discussion about technology, but equally there'll be no dispute on our side of the council that it's extremely important to be able to talk to our residents and to deal with their issues. But when it comes to how the council itself operates, it is largely in its own hands. So, for example, and this was CIPFA detail for 1718, in Merton, the average number of meetings attended by every councillor was 19.9. In Haringey, it's 38.7, and in Bexley, which is at the bottom of the 15.8. So it is up to each council to decide how many committees do you have, how many people do you want to serve on those committees, and also I really want to underline the point that opposition members and administration backbench members are not involved in quite a lot of what the council does, which is actually in their submission. So, for example, what goes on in the Merton Partnership is like in a parallel universe as far as we're concerned, because we're not involved in it in any way, shape or form. And I suspect that the majority of administration backbench councillors are not involved in it. Yes, the leader chairs the partnership. Yes, some of the cabinet members are involved, and clearly if you're a cabinet member and you get a special responsibility allowance, it's because there will be a conflict between, if you've got a day job, your day job, and the demands of the council. But, you know, Peter, you've just said it yourself. You've been a councillor for 33 years and been in employment. I was in employment for 25 years. 3 of those, I was leader of the opposition. You know, you can do it because you mix and match. In a ward, you've probably not got, or you might be unlucky if you've got all 3 of you who are in employment. And, you know, you can, as I say, mix and match. You can share that load. So, candidly, to up the number of electors per councillor is not going to push any one individual to breaking point, and the way in which we operate within the council at these kind of meetings is largely up to us and how we advise to take that.
Okay.
Thank you. Just in response to that, I mean, I'm lucky that I'm in a ward which is held by Liberal Democrats, but if you're in a split ward, I think that that's the opposite of how it can actually mean it's much more difficult, and you can't rely on, you know, your ward council or Tory to go attend the things that you as a Liberal Democrat can't. So I don't know. I think there's flaws to what you just stated there.
Actually, I thought you were going to make my point, to be honest. you can flip the argument completely the other way around.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah, I just wanted to briefly say, I was confused. Are you trying to find the absolute minimum where it could be possible that people with certain types of jobs could do it, the operative word being could, rather than aiming for what we've heard a good council should be aiming for, and giving the space for the council to do that? I think, you know, there are arguments for reducing, but you would have to sacrifice some things in that, I would say, to do that, whereas keeping near the status quo, whilst also bolstering and focusing on where we want to be as a council could, I argue, do both things.
If I could just come back on your point, David, I think you said you've done it. I have, in that time, often felt I've been a poor father, that I have missed open evenings and sporting occasions and performances that my kids were involved in because I needed to be attending a council meeting. And they all tell their stories of things Dad missed. I've often felt I've been not as good a counsellor as I would like to be because of the pressures of work. And I've often felt that, you know, sometimes I'm tired going into it. There were days when, there were times when we used to have, you know, we had an extraordinary council meeting that went on a bit late. But you will remember council meetings, extraordinary.
Plus 3 in the morning. Yeah.
Finishing at 3:30 in the morning.
Go to work the next day.
And we'd get up, we'd go to work the next day, and we'd be wrecked. So maybe I'm kind of seeking perfection in myself, but there have often been times where I don't think I've been good enough in any of those numerous roles. But what I've always been absolutely sure about is the fact that I do have a job and I can bring that experience. The fact that I do have children going through Merton schools and I can draw on that experience. And the fact that I've been a carer for my father towards the end of his life when he had dementia. You know, all of those things help me to make a real contribution to our community. And I'd hate to think that people from that kind of background, with those kind of pressures, would be excluded because there are so few of us that we've got to almost be full-time and devote our lives to it, because that would be, the council would be the poorer for that. And I believe that passionately. I hope it comes across.
But, Peter, you've just said most of what I was going to say, and I still repeat them. I'm one of those people who do a lot of things. When I became a counsellor, I gave up teaching, my full-time teaching, because I was at that age where I was going to anyway. But I was still teaching, lecturing, I should say, with the Open University. I am doing lots of other things. I'm a governor for Southend's group of colleges, and I make no bones about it. I bring lots of things to this council, and vice versa. So you cross-fertilize. And I would hate anyone to put me in a little box, and I only can think one way. I leave tomorrow. I leave right now. But I'm not going to do that, because I don't think any of what I've done. I worked with the police for 10 years. As a magistrate until 2 weeks ago. And all of those things have been used here as well as outside. Even today, and I don't want to go into all of what I've done today with outside agencies because of things that I've done. And so for someone to say that you have to be one thing, you become very narrow-minded if that's all you can think about. And with Peter, yes, I have 2 children. and I tried to be at parents' evening. If I couldn't be there, my husband would be there, because I remember my own self. When my parents couldn't go there, I couldn't remember all the good things I did. I kept thinking, you went at the play, or whatever it is, you should have been there. But in fact, you do bring things from outside. And if you come on the board of governors for certain group of colleges, there are members there who work in finance who say that there should be no counsellors because they don't bring anything. Well, I soon remind them that most of what happens there, the different council, including this one, Merton, actually, because we were reading something from Chris Lee's paper, that they have to look at these things. So I don't agree that you have to retire and sit and just think of council papers, because you really wouldn't even understand it because you're not linking it to the world outside. And that's what I have to say. I sound a bit annoyed. I am a bit, because really people make assumption of other people and it's not really true.
Okay, I think we have given this a good hearing. David, I can see you want.
Well, look, I don't take issue with anything that Brenda has just said or that you said. But the fact of the matter is that you can find different ways of working. And, you know, the specific example that Peter raised about council meetings that did go on until 3:30 in the morning, certainly if it was finished by 2, you thought it was an early night, was solved by introducing a guillotine that the meeting shouldn't go on for more than 3 hours. And, you know, the world didn't stop and the council didn't cease to function when we disciplined ourselves in that way. If we could have smaller committees, we could meet less frequently as necessary. We could do, if we're doing scrutiny, we could do perhaps more work in task groups than we necessarily need to do as a whole body on a panel. So, I mean, all right, we'll be making our submission. We will be voting against this recommendation tonight, and we will record against it. But I hope that by giving us a chance, and thank you, to make our points, that it isn't rubbishing anything that's been said, it's an alternative view of how we might operate.
And as Democrats, I think it's really important that we respect that view and that difference and encourage you to make your submission and to speak up and sort of talk about how you think the council should be run. So that's really important, and that's why I've been very keen to hear from members of the opposition. And I'd like to hear from our independent member now. So,
yes, thank you, Chair. I don't normally speak very much at these meetings, you know, as an observer, but can I say I'm not disagreeing with anything that anyone has said, but when you consider this proposal to the electrical, could you perhaps also consider the fact that the constituents have relationships with their council members, which are very important to them. Now, I live in St Helier ward, and there was a proposal, as you all know, a couple of years ago from the parliamentary boundaries that we were to be hired off into Sutton Chi. And this is very devastating for people who've had Siobhan as our MP for many, many years, who know her, even if they don't agree with her politics. Who know that they can go and see her, they know who she is. None of us know this person from Sutton Chi, whoever is in that seat. No one's ever heard of him. And I think the same thing applies with the councillors as well. People, obviously new councillors come in because people retire as councillors and so on, it's a natural process. But there is, in general, or there has been in general continuity, people know their councillors, they value you, and to suddenly be in a different ward or in a different grouping is actually quite upsetting to a lot of people. So I'd just like to hope that is a consideration that's taken on board when these submissions are made.
Thank you. I think that's a really important point to make, because people hear that perspective as well. So we've given this a good airing. We've been asked to approve the submission. I think I'm going to be, from what I've heard, that there will be a need for a vote. So can I see those in favour of this submission to, as put before you to the Boundary Commission? And those against?
May our names recorded, please?
Of course. Okay, thank you. So item 10 is the paper on service tenancy, and that's on the supplementary. Howard, you're going to look for this? Thank you. Thank you, Andrew. Thanks.
I think Brenda said the committee asked for these papers before. I beg your pardon. The papers being brought to this committee meeting on the request of the committee because there were concerns over the limited assurance given to the audit of the service tenancies item. Within this paper, I've thought to deal with the things that are outstanding with regards to the rating that the audit was given. The fund listed within paragraph 2.2 of the report, which is the 8th concern, and within paragraph 2.2.1, I've in individual paragraphs responding to items outstanding. I hope explain what's going on and how these individual outstanding items are being dealt with. Irrespective of these concerns, what I would say is that I believe that the management of the council's service tenancy properties is being looked after as well as it can. Certain things have taken longer than I and the others would like to have dealt with. That's because there are natural sensitivities in dealing with these properties. For people who are in them, it's their home, and they need to be dealt with sensitively. Nevertheless, we have come to the conclusion that the review of the properties within the environment and regeneration portfolio, and the ones within children's schools and families have started. And perhaps to give a feel for the numbers, overall there are 58 properties within the different departments of the council that fall into these categories. 20 of them are within environment and regen. There are 34 within children's schools and families, and there are 2 each within community and housing and within corporate services. However, I should say that not all of them are let for residential purposes, and some of them within children's schools and families, for example, have been taken back to the school for no particular use. The ones which are in corporate services are actually the old, would have been caretakers' houses, or flats rather, on the roof of the wing of this building. They are no longer used for residential purposes, they are used for the corporate services instance, provide accommodation for children's schools and families, offices. Since the policy was formed by Cabinet in 2009, considerable progress has been made with regards to the management of these properties. There are 13 that have been taken back and are now being commercially let, which generate an income of about £180,000 a year out of the ones that have been taken back and are commercially let. There are certain properties also which have been taken out of our control within children's schools and families because they've got the free transfer to academies, and therefore dealt with through the academies rather than ourselves. Although, because we still own the freehold properties, they are still on the list as officially council residential properties. The management also of them has been helped by the formation of one record, as you'll see referred to within the report. I manage that. It's a schedule which identifies all of the properties, the rents being paid, who's in them, what the term of the occupation is, and indeed where some of them have been lost through demolition. And that is regularly updated as fresh information comes in as the commercial tendencies have changed. As indeed often we've had to take action to get possession back of properties. And there are 2 which we've dealt with just through the past 12 months within children's schools and families that caretakers have left. So, in summary, I believe that the service tenancy properties are being managed as well as we can at the moment. I'm disappointed like anybody else would be that we sort of got a limited assurance from the audit. But I hope can be seen within the report that we're moving forward to draw that to a conclusion so the limited assurance should be removed within the next, or by December of this year at the very latest.
Okay. Margaret, do you want to add anything?
I just want to say, I mean, I've been through the actions we've held and you generally the report and just to give you an update. I definitely think there's progress there. So they've moved down to one schedule. They're keeping that up to date on, as you said, the schools tenancies have more of a turnover. So it definitely seems to be heading the right way. There's still some actions to be implemented. We're quite happy to go back in and do a review at the end just to see if that should clear the fields. So yeah, I think it's moving.
Okay. David.
Yes, well, I mean, I was leader of the council when we had this policy agreed in June of 2009. I have to say I'm a bit kind of disappointed that we're still talking about it nearly 10 years later. There are two questions specifically I had, if I might. Firstly, at paragraph 2, level 1, you talk about tentative negotiations with existing tenants in ENR, and then it's scheduled to be completed by the end of this financial year. So that's in a couple of weeks' time. Are we on schedule for that?
Well, the answer is no, we're not. That's a mistake.
Right.
I should have put in calendar year rather than financial year, and I can only apologise for that.
Oh, so 31st of December.
Yes.
And then at little 4, it says that the council let vacant properties to a private company, blah, blah. And then it goes on to say, there's concern that the private company was secured through a process that did not comply with contract standing orders. Can you give us a bit more information about that and what's being, what is being done to put that right?
Well, certainly. It was a balancing act. In as much as we wanted to generate income for the council, we wanted to have the property occupied, and we also needed to make sure that when we formed these tenancies, and in a way that the council would get possession back with as little difficulty as possible whilst maximising revenue. We came to the view that the best way of doing that was by putting a company as a tenant in between the council and the people who are actually in occupation. And that's what we've done. And the way that it works is that we grant a lease to the company. They pay us a rent, which is a proportion of the rent that they get for the tenant in occupation that they sublet to. At the moment, we've gradually whittled that down over the years so that the council has got an increased proportion over to the company. So I think that, if memory serves me, we currently get 12% of that rent. In addition to that, our tenant, if you like, they are responsible to pay us the rent whether the property's occupied or not. Now, when we originally set her up, the difficulty was in finding a company that was prepared to do it. There were loads of organisations out there who would act as a managing agent and put somebody in the property for us whether they would be our tenant. But that was no good, because it exposed us to the risk of the tenant becoming a secure tenant and attracting off the bunch. I found the company that we currently use, and it's developing a quite satisfactory relationship with the Bones Bank. I don't have any management problems with them. They pay us the rent. So the concern was over the selection of that one individual company. I'm sure that we did follow the correct contract standing orders at that time, because it goes back some years. The original tenancy, which it's where it started, may be familiar with the property, was at Old One Sports Ground. There was a caretaker's house, cottage attached to the pavilion, and it was in the letting of that first came across this particular company. Since then, it's expanded as more properties have come into taken possession. We've been able to do it. I've had the conversation with the procurement team. They were concerned, but they are concerned about it. They're happy with the current arrangement being maintained. I should say that the contract that was between ourselves and this company is simply a lease. There's no other contract between us. It's simply an internal relationship. But nevertheless, the procurement team says that when the current arrangements come to an end, which is in other words, when these current when the leases expire. Sorry?
When is that?
It'll be about 2 years' time. Because we ordinarily we grant leases of about to this particular tenant for about 3 years. So if we do it every year, we're constantly redoing leases. So there's a judgment of how long we grant it for. So we give it about 3 years.
So what they're saying is that at the end of that period, there's going to be some sort of competitive tendering exercise.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, and that's what we're intending to do.
Confident with that? I mean, I would prefer that it hadn't happened in that way, to be frank. I think I tend to agree with the procurement team. But if it's going to be changed, then I think that's the best we can expect in the circumstances. Are there any other questions? Okay. Well, in that case, thank you for giving me that report. Item 11 is update on RIPA authorisation, and Fabiola is going to update it.
This is the regular update that was presented to this committee with regards to RIPA authorisations. Since September 2018, there has been one request for directed surveillance, which has been authorised, and that was in relation to fly tipping.
Thank you, Howard.
Oh, sorry, thank you.
This resulted in 14 cases, of which 9 received fixed penalty notices from the town, 1 home office caution. There was 1 investigation pending and 3 cases that were cancelled. Also, since September 2018, there have been no requests for CCTV footage in regards to RIPA investigations. There have been no RIPA authorisations that have been rejected by the Magistrates Court. And since September 2018, no application has been made for the acquisition of communications content.
Thank you. Any questions? John, do you want to talk about fly tipping? Because if you don't, I will.
Well, my was great. We were overwhelmed with fly tipping. And we reported, say, today and a week or more before it's cleared up. And today I reported about 6. And I keep looking every time I go, well, you can picture. It's going to take another week or 2 before they collect it.
But what we're talking about here is deterrence, so that people don't. Now, I think in the past this committee has expressed a strong view that we should be doing more of it.
Yeah.
And I am astonished that Cedars Avenue, which is the road, the one-way street that goes across Mitchell Common, on at least 2 occasions in the last few months, somebody has driven a tipper truck down there at 6 o'clock in the morning. I'm normally there at 6:30 with my dog picked up, and people have not been able to get to work because somebody's driven down the main road, tipped a load of stuff, mounted stuff out of the back of the truck and driven off. And we need cameras there. We need to catch those people. We need to confiscate their vehicles, and whatever powers we have, because that is just appalling. And I think every ward member will be able to tell you stories of people who have no consideration for their neighbours, for the community in which they live, and for the council taxpayers who have to foot the bill when they dump stuff out in the street. So I'd just like to say that from my perspective, but I see a lot of heads nodding around.
Yeah, it is.
And we'd like to see more.
Well, I take on board what's been said and pass that back. I did get some figures from my colleagues in litigation with regards to mining, fly tipping, but littering, if councillors are interested with regards to those statistics.
1st of September 2019 to February 2019, there have been 174 littering cases prosecuted. These were initiated following the issue of fixed penalty notices by the council's contractors. The general level of fines is £220, costs of £150, and the victim surcharge of £30. With regards to the same period, there have been 5 flight tipping cases, and all of these were caught as a result of directed surveillance at Streatham Road, Ditcham, Something. There have been quite significant fines. If I go through some of these, the total costs to individuals have been ranging, which would include the fine, contribution to costs and victim surcharge, 1,030. Another one was 1,196, 1,600. So they're getting quite substantial fines. So I think the magistrates are taking on board that this is a serious problem. I also contacted the communications team to see in regards to how one is publicising in anticipation of such questions. There haven't been any press releases on flighter convictions issued during the last 6 months, but at the moment the communications team are drafting a press release with regards to highlighting covert operations and the Fly Tippers We Are Watching You campaign. There was also a feature on flighter convictions in my Merton last autumn. This reported that the council prosecuted 22 people in the Mitcham area and handed out fines. It was also noted in this article that by installing hidden cameras, council officers were able to identify those responsible for dumping rubbish. There is also to be an article in my Merton due to be published at the end of this month, and this is reporting that 19 convictions made last year from covert operations.
Anything more? Could I ask how much it costs in the direct surveillance, and is the costs met by the the fines that are imposed? Because I've always been told that it's too expensive.
I'm not aware of what the cost is. I would have to find that out and report back.
Agatha?
Thank you for that. You just said that it's been reported in my Merton and the communications teams are now drafting something. It's not enough. It's not enough to do it every season to say what's going on. People need to know that something is actually being done. There should be a constant, regular communication to the residents saying so-and-so is being fined, so-and-so is being having to pay this money, this is going on. Intermittently, it's not enough. Nobody's getting the information. You can only say that they want to see things are going on, and that would also be a deterrent to other people. But if you're not getting information, there's no point.
I must say I'm disappointed that the comms team have not issued a press release in the last 6 months where if you make people aware of the potential consequences of their action, then it acts as a deterrent. It may not stop it, but it will remind people of what may happen. Adam?
Chair, could I actually echo Councillor Agatha's point there in terms of when I'm speaking to constituents in Rains Park, for example, is that they feel that people are fly tipping and there's absolutely nothing being done about it. So where obviously success has happened, they aren't really aware of it at all. And I mean, from their point of view, people are continuing to fly tip, nothing's being done. It takes over a week to come and collect them, and it's just sort of just continuing on week after week. So yeah, totally echo your point.
So could we as a committee request that the comms team issue a press release every time somebody is successfully prosecuted for flight tipping? Is that something that we agree?
I can just say something actually. The people who fly tip, they don't read my Merton. They don't read it.
Some people don't
They
get
get
my
it.
Merton.
I might use
to make it in my Merton, it doesn't really.
They're tipping out.
Thank you, Chair. I fundamentally agree that the people who apply to be really aren't going to be deterred by the little article in my Merton. What I would like to know is though what's happened to the naming and shaming. I'm assuming all of these have been named on the website because that is something that we started doing long before I was a councillor. We had 2 people on it. I've never seen anybody ever since. So why aren't we just naming and shaming them as we apparently are supposed to do or agreed to do?
I can't assist on that. Sorry, I'm not in litigation. I'm
Yes,
a commercial lawyer.
Fair enough.
And I understand what's being said. So what I'll do is I'll feedback and ask for a response with regards to that.
I think in fairness it was perhaps more towards the Chair's point about asking Commons to issue a press release, but they should be putting the names on the website anyway as a matter of course.
I will feedback that.
Unless GDPR prevents us from owning such things. If you can check whether that is a policy, and if so, why aren't they doing it? But the clear message from Standards and General Purposes Committee is we want more action and we want people to be aware. Sorry.
As somebody who works as a magistrate, and David knows, in Wimbledon and in Lavender Hill, we do see these people. It is nothing secret. The press is sometimes there anyway. Plus, there are people in the public gallery, so I don't see why they can't be named and shamed. And we've asked and we've asked and we've asked, and it's not being put out. And really, I believe, because outside where I live on Rowan Road, I don't know who, well, I did know, and I reported some of them, because I saw them. Plus, they kindly left their addresses anyway, which we took pictures and gave them on. But we didn't get the final report on it, and I wanted it to use at the meetings, so that people stop putting things at that bus stop. Because the bins are emptied on Wednesday morning at 7. By 7 p.m. There's 6 or more bags there. And I think, why don't you use your bin? But if we actually did something and other people know that, and it hurts in their pockets, perhaps we'll get somewhere. My Merton is supposed to be to every household. I'm afraid it doesn't get to every household. So some people don't read it because they don't get it. And the local press, well, we can forget about that one because we hardly ever see it. But we really need it, and I have 6 notice boards. I very happily put them out, so people do read those boards, so that they can see who the culprits are, and stop saying, Merton Council doesn't do anything. In fact, it's not Merton Council, it's people. But until we do something about it, we won't get any changes.
Thank you. Thank you. Right, we've given that one a good hearing. So item 12 is complaints against members. Have you ever been an update on that?
In the last 3 months, there have been 3 complaints. For 2 of those, Paul Adams has had a discussion with the same person, and it was agreed neither of them merited further investigation and these have been closed. One related to comments on Twitter, one related to an allegation that a member had been rude. There is 1 pending complaint, and this is going through the procedure.
I'm glad that they're keeping you busy.
Oh yes.
Thank you for the work you do. Okay, thank you for that. That's noted. Item 13 is the work programme. Is that noted? Item 14 is exclusion of the press and public. To resolve that the public are excluded from the meeting during consideration of the following report on the grounds that it is exempt from disclosure for the reasons stated.